Today we have with us from the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, Michael Harvey, Vice President, Policy and International. For the Canadian Nuclear Association, George Christitis, Vice President, Government Relations and International Affairs. For the Global Automakers of Canada, David Adams, President and Chief Executive Officer by video conference. And the Tree of Life, Lisa McNeil, President. Welcome to all of you on this rainy, miserable Monday, and I hope you all bring a smile and some happiness to our outlook on today's schedule. Welcome all. We will start with opening remarks and then proceed with a round of questions. Mr. Harvey, I invite you for an opening statement of up to 5 minutes, please.
Bonjour.
Good morning. I would first of all like to thank members of the committee for this opportunity to share my perspectives on non-tariff barriers in trade agreements. For almost 2 years now, I've been the Vice President, Policy and International at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. We represent over 400 local, provincial, and territorial chamber members and about 100 association members for a total of 200,000 businesses represented. I'll make most of my presentation in English, but I will answer your questions in French when questions are asked in that language.
I have been involved in international trade discussions from private sector, government, and industry perspectives for more than 25 years. I'll limit my comments today to a more strategic level, as I'm not a specialized trade lawyer with deep technical experience. That said, many companies we represent are facing specific issues in different countries, and we have informed our members that they can make written submissions to you for this study. As committee members are aware, non-tariff barriers are obstacles to trade that are not in the form of tariffs. Common examples are quotas, technical regulations, and licensing requirements. These barriers can be challenging for businesses, and I do not believe that they will ever totally be eliminated. There are often legitimate reasons for technical regulations and licensing requirements, and businesses constantly manage them. What we seek is that these regulatory requirements not become discriminatory trade barriers. I recently participated virtually in a panel organized in Brussels by the Canada-EU Trade and Investment Association. I learned there that under CIIT, regulatory cooperation has been key to solving disputes. CIIT represents a third-generation trade agreement, one that aims to create deep economic and trade links by focusing on barriers to trade beyond tariffs. CIIT has a complex system of regulatory cooperation with a long list of dialogues and committees dealing with specific areas of regulatory cooperation, as well as a general regulatory cooperation forum. I am not a specialist, but I learned that a number of disputes are being solved through these mechanisms. I was told that often the EU regulatory authorities simply need to better understand how the Canadian product is meeting the goals of the EU regulation, if not the letter of the law, or the way the law has been applied in the past. That said, we should not be naive. Sometimes these non-tariff barriers are largely an excuse to try to keep Canadian goods out of a market. When that is the case, Canada needs to expend political capital to push for barriers to be lifted. This political capital does not always need to be at the highest level. We do not want our bilateral relationships to be hostage to specific disputes. However, our trade commissioners need to push constantly to call out when non-tariff barriers are being used unfairly and work to ensure regulatory authorities prioritize meetings with Canadian regulators who are able to explain how our products meet the spirit of local requirements, taking away any excuses that may be used by local regulators to prevent market access. Dispute settlement mechanisms can often also be a key factor when seeking redress. Sometimes what regulators need is an external referee who takes the burden of decision-making off their shoulders. It is easy for a regulator to be captured by local industry interests, and it can be very strategic for Canada to obtain dispute settlement mechanisms in our trade agreements. The success of dispute settlement mechanisms in investment protection is well established. I can underline from my Latin American experience that dispute settlement mechanisms are essential when governments change and new administrations seek to overlook the commitments made by their predecessors. This principle can be usefully applied to regulatory disputes. And I'll switch to French. J'aimerais terminer.
I would like to conclude my comments by noting that these are difficult times in terms of the international commitment of individual countries. We all think of Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine or the Chinese government's challenge to the international standard system. Unfortunately, even the United States, a leader of the international system developed in the post-war period, refuses to fully implement measures that are unfavorable to it. A recent example is the decision of the panel established under the Canada-US-Mexico Agreement on the national origin of cars. Another example is the use by the United States of the so-called national security test to protect its steel and aluminum tariffs at the World Trade Organization. While these examples underscore the size of the challenge, Canada must do its part to protect the international trading system that already exists and develop the international trading system of the future. We will do this in part by finding solutions to non-tariff barriers, and I commend the members of the committee for taking the initiative to study this issue and to propose ways forward.